it, and it'll be a good time of singing. The sun is perfectly shining off of Ace's roof. I can't see nothing. All right, I can't look up over there. Praise the Lord. All right, well, we're going to be in Esther chapter 4. No more delay. Y'all have been here all morning. You know what's going on. Esther chapter 4. Last week we finished chapter 3 and really discovered the main problem of the entire book. A man named Haman, out of his own pride, arrogancy, and anger, decided to have a decree written that all the Jews, Jewish children, all of them be killed. And so that decree has just gone out at the end of chapter 3. So the decree has gone out. The people are seeing the decree now. It's there, and it is terrifying them. And so now we're going to get into chapter 4 today. And this is the chapter where our series title, This Is Our Time, comes from. This is our time. All right, well, let's stand together and read all of chapter 17. 4. All the way to verse 17. I'm looking at 17, sorry. All the way to verse 17, whole chapter. Verse number 1. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud and a bitter cry. And even before the king's gate, and came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province, whithersoever the king's commandments and his decrees came, there was a great mourning among the Jews, and fasting, and weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. Very understandable response. Verse 4. So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told it her. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai, and to take away his sackcloth from him, but he received it not. Then called Esther to Hatak, is how I'm going to say it. Good luck with that one. Hatak, I don't know, that guy. One of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. So Hatak went forth to Mordecai unto the street of the city, which was before the king's gate. And Mordecai told him all that had happened unto him, and the sum of the money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasury for the Jews to destroy them. And he gave him the copy of the writings of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king, to make supplication unto him, and to make request before him for her people. So Hatak came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again, Esther spake unto Hatak and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. And here's her response. Verse 11. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that they may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. And they told to Mordecai Esther's words. And Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed, and who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer. Go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Let's pray one more time. Dear Heavenly Father, I ask that you'd help us with this message. Lord, help us to figure out the truths of it for us, how it applies to our lives. And Lord, we're so thankful for the truths from this account that we can learn. Bless this time. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. You may be seated. Thank you for standing. pause while I grab this. I've titled the message, It Is No Accident. It is no accident. Because accidents happen. All the time. I accidentally have messed up the bulletin a few times. I've accidentally put typos into the Sunday school lessons. I've accidentally spilt things. Not too often, but sometimes. Have you ever accidentally texted somebody the wrong message? I did it just last night. I went to mark a message as read, and for some reason one of the suggested texts was happy birthday. And it was like, just right above it. So I went to hit the mark as read, and I accidentally hit the happy birthday because I got fat thumbs. And then I had to text him, sorry, that was not the button I meant to hit, but it sounds like you're really trying to sing happy birthday. It was weird. Yeah, it was embarrassing. Have you ever called somebody by the wrong name accidentally? Hate that. Mortifying. I really try to learn everybody's names, and sometimes you think you got it, and that's even worse when you don't have it. Have you ever fallen in front of somebody?
Yeah.
That can be embarrassing, can't it? It doesn't happen to me, but I know for normal people with not as good of reflexes as I have, that can happen. While accidents happen, sometimes more often to some of us than others, what we have in our text today is no accident. It's no accident. Look back at the text. We're going to break it down, and I'm going to try to be quick because, I understand that I lose your attention after lunch pretty quickly. Here we go. Chapter 3 ended with the decree that all the Jews would be killed on the 13th day of the 12th month. It perplexed everyone. Not just the Jews, but all the Greeks alike, the Persians alike, all the Gentiles, what I meant to say, just Gentiles in general, anybody that's not a Jew, they were all perplexed. Again, because if the king's willing to just kill one random group of people, what's stopping him from killing our group of people? Because the kingdom of Persia was just a culmination of a lot of different races and countries that were all conquered by the Persians and Medes and taken over. And now we see Mordecai's reaction. It says, when he perceived all that was done. Now this is more than just he read the poster, the decree. That's our mind as he sees the decree and goes, oh no. He takes some time to investigate. Because the information that he gives to Esther is not in the decree. Remember, the decree doesn't even have Haman's name on it. The decree does not have the amount that Haman is going to pay the king to have the Jews killed on it. And yet that's information that he, through some investigation, discovers. The decree is in the king's name, and he knows it's Haman. The decree does not say that money was offered for the Jews, but that was a fact. So he has to do a little bit of investigation. So when we see when he perceived all that was done, it wasn't just he read the decree, he really got into it. Then without a doubt, figuring out it was Haman that made the decree, figuring out it was Haman's anger, maybe even in his investigation it was his anger at him. No doubt he's feeling pretty guilty right now. I've never made a decision that's affected that many people. Some of my decisions affect my family. Some of my decisions affect this church. I've never made a decision that affects all of my race, my ethnicity. And yet that's what he just did. And so could you imagine the guilt that he's feeling maybe right now? I understand grieving and mourning, but I got to believe there was at least a little bit of guilt in his own heart. If I had just bowed, if I had just paid reverence to this guy Haman, maybe none of this would happen. Maybe none of the Jews would have been in this position. Maybe I wouldn't be in this position. And so picture that with me. He's guilty. He's feeling rough. Let me say this. It's easy to second guess a decision you make when it doesn't turn out like you think it should. No. When he made a stand to say, I'm not going to bow to an enemy of my people. I'm not going to bow to Haman. I'm not going to bow to an Agagite. I'm not going to bow to an Amalekite. I'm not going to do it. I don't care what position he's put into. I refuse. When he made that decision, in his mind and in his heart, he may have said, I'm ready for whatever repercussions this brings on my life, but I'm ready for it. Just because it doesn't go like you planned, doesn't mean it was the wrong decision. Just because it doesn't go like you planned, just because it doesn't turn out the way you thought it should, doesn't mean it's the wrong decision. I believe even if it wasn't necessarily for God, which you could make an argument was for God, but at least it was for his race, he made the right decision. But it's easy to second guess it whenever things get dark like it does here in the passage. And now because he chose to mourn in sackcloth and ashes, of course he wasn't allowed into the king's gate. Say, why would they do that? Well, the king's gate, why would the king want anybody sad or looking all ashy and sackcloth in there? No, he wants everybody in there to be in their best robes and smiling, and he wants it to be a happy place, if you'd say it like that. And so they're not allowed in. That's just the rules of the land. Verse 3 tells us that not only Mordecai, but all the Jews, as they were discovering and seeing and reading what was said, they all begin to weep and fast and wail and put on sackcloth and ashes. So we have not just Mordecai, we have the reaction of everyone in verse 3, all the Jews. This mourning got the queen's attention, even though she was separated from it all. Now, the queen, she lived a very comfortable life. Inside the palace walls, she really had no reason to venture out. She had no reason to, she was waited on hand and foot. She was very well taken care of. And so a lot of this decrees that are written don't even really matter to her most of the time. Because she's the queen. It doesn't affect her life. But we get a hint that Esther likes to keep an eye on her uncle, or her cousin, who's like uncle age, but kind of father figure, her adopted father. You say, why is that? Well, it doesn't say that she sent people to investigate Mordecai. It just says that all of a sudden people come back letting her know, her handmaids and chamberlains, how Mordecai's doing, which makes me think that she kind of keeps an eye on her adopted father, or has people keep an eye on him. So he's wailing, he's mourning, he's in sackcloth and ashes, and then she finds out about it. Well, like anybody that has power, you want to alleviate other people's problems. I don't like it when my kids are sad. If I have the power to fix it, I fix it. Now, if they're sad because I told them no, that's tough cookies. I don't mind that at all, actually. It kind of brings me a sixth sense of enjoyment. But let's say they're sick. If it's in my power to help them, I do what I can. I'll buy what I have to buy. I'll sacrifice a lot of sleep to make sure they stay comfortable and all that to get them better. When you love somebody, you want to take care of them. And so out of love, don't misunderstand. She loves Mordecai. She sends a set of clothes for him, probably something more expensive than he ever owned before. Now, I know he has a position in the king's gate. I know he wouldn't have been panhandling on the street. He was a well-to-do man. But this is still something that the queen could afford, which is what the king can afford, which is pretty nice. So she sends this clothing to him, and he refuses it. And not that he's refusing the clothes because, I don't want your dirty clothes. I don't want your king's clothes. He refuses it because he's letting her know, I'm not going to stop mourning about this. It's a refusal to quit mourning. It's a refusal to get past what he's upset about. Now, if he was mourning because the dog died, then it wouldn't be, that'd be no big deal. Whatever. Here's your clothes. He'd probably get over it. I'd get over a dog dying for a set of clothes. I'd get over a dog dying for a Reese's cup, if I'm honest. It's like, whatever. It's just an animal. But verse 7 reports that he gave all... So she's confused when he refuses. So she sends the guy Hadek, somebody that speaks Persian, maybe he'd be better at that. So she sends him to Mordecai. So he comes to discover the matter. So now it's not just here's a delivery from the queen. It's all right. Let's sit down. Let's figure out all that's happening. And I'm trying to go quick, but stay with me. So he sits down and he explains. He reports all the facts that he's discovered, not just the decree. He sends him with the decree and what it says, but he lets her know. Okay, this isn't just a decree from your husband, the king. This is a decree from Haman. And this is a decree where he promised to pay to have all of us killed. This is the reality. Maybe he included in that story. This is what I did to make him mad. Doesn't say if he did or didn't. I'm inclined that he did. If he's the kind of guy I think he is, he probably would have at least owned up to what he feels like may have been the cause of all this. But knowledge of a situation doesn't really matter. No, Esther having knowledge of the situation doesn't matter. Knowledge doesn't matter. If I know how to rebuild an engine, it does not matter unless I need to use that. If I use the knowledge to rebuild an engine, then it's useful. But knowledge for no reason it's pointless. It's a waste of time. So her understanding all of this, her understanding that Haman's plot, her understanding why the decree was wrote, her understanding the position that her people are in, none of that matters unless she's willing to do something about it. Similar to that, knowledge of what's coming in the future doesn't mean anything unless you're willing to do something about what you can change today. What I mean by that is, hey, we have knowledge of the rapture coming. Well, if the rapture is coming, we believe that. That knowledge is no good to us unless we're willing to do something about it today, to try to make sure other people are a part of it, to try to prepare people. Along with the copy of the decree, Mordecai sent Haddock with a message. This was his message. And to charge her that she should go in unto the king to make supplication unto him and to make request before him for her people. So Haddock delivers the message and the decree. And I want you to pause and ask yourself, what would you do if it was on your shoulders to help a lot of people? To possibly risk it all to help your people. Now, if we're honest, you can say what you want to say, but most of us are selfish. Well, most of us, I would do what I can for most of you, but there's only about 3 people in this room that I'd do anything for. The rest of you, I'd do what I could. For Nathan, I'm not doing anything. That's a joke. I know, no, it's not a joke. Never mind. So she's faced with this charge to go to the king and make a supplication, intervene, step up and say something, request his grace. Very difficult situation. She responds to Mordecai in verse 11 and explains essentially why this won't work. I love verse 11. Verse 11 cracks me up every time I read it. Here's what she sends back. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces do know. Oh, you know this too. Don't misunderstand. She's saying, you already know. You know. Everyone knows. This is common knowledge. Maybe she's not trying to be disrespectful, but she's trying to remind him of something that he's very aware of. He knew this when he told her to go and make supplication, but she's trying to act like, in case you missed it here, do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. So essentially this is what her response is. Mordecai, I know you know the laws. Everybody knows the laws. Nobody gets into the king's gate, the inner gate, without being called, or they're killed. Now there's one exception. She says he's got a golden scepter. Everybody knows that if he holds out that golden scepter to you and you go and acknowledge the fact that he acknowledged you, you get to live and he'll listen to your request. But just so you know, he hasn't called me in 30 days. By the way, that goes back to my point that the crown was just a crown. The person that was wearing the crown wasn't all that important to King Ahasuerus. He was selfish. He fulfilled his lust as often as he wanted with his harem of women that he had. And so who was wearing the crown was just so that they had somebody wearing a crown. And so she hasn't even seen the king in 30 days. Can you believe that? She lives in a complete different place. So she's basically saying, look, this can't work. You can't go in unless he summons you, and I haven't been summoned in the last 30 days. And who knows how long it'll be till he summons me again for whatever reason. I may not get a chance to talk to him. This is impossible. It's just not going to work. It really essentially was an excuse. Now, I do want to give Esther a lot of grace here. I would probably make an excuse too. I think anybody in their right mind would essentially make an excuse, at least at first. No, don't look at me like, I make excuses for not having to get up off the couch if I don't have to. I'm like, all right, I just heard one of them fall and hit a wall. One of them's crying, but is it that blood-curdling cry or is it just the whine cry? No, I don't think that's the blood-curdling cry. I'm going to stay here. It's natural for all of us to want it out, for somebody else to have to be the one to deal with it. That, by the way, does cross my mind. If I pretend I don't hear it long enough, will Holly go take care of this? Which, odds are, where she is at it with her pregnancy, she's not taking care of it. She's going to be like, it's easier for you to get up, go. So I want to give her a lot of grace in that. I don't think she meant it in the sense of, I don't have any love for my people, I don't want to help. I think she legit, it was fear. I mean, hey, do you realize if I try to just go in and talk to him and I go into his inner gate, he could just have me killed? I've been in this position for some 3-4 years, but that doesn't mean anything. He'll get rid of me just as quick as he dropped Vashti. And so here's Mordecai's response. Mordecai hears from Hadok, whatever, then tells him to tell the queen not to be fooled. She will not escape the fate of the Jews from this palace. Now, I don't think that was necessarily her thought. I don't believe that Esther had it in her mind that, well, this isn't my problem, this is a you problem. I do that all the time. I'm like, well, that's a you problem. Not my problem. Well, Pastor, this is going on. I'm like, sinks for you, buddy. Not my problem. I don't think she had that mentality. Like, well, if I just let this happen, at least I know I'm safe. I don't believe that was her intent at all. But Mordecai wants to remind her, this is all Jews. Don't think just because you're in a palace that you're going to get to escape the wickedness that's going to befall our people. And then, of course, we have the most famous verse of all of Esther, probably. I'd guess that is the most. Let's read it. It's verse 14. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Now let's break that down. It really goes into two parts. The beginning of verse 14, the end of verse 14. The beginning of verse 14 is one of the strongest indicators that Mordecai was still a man of faith to a degree. At least believing in God to a degree. Because here's what he says. Let's read it again so you understand it, and I'll talk about it here. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place, but thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. What is he saying there? Well, he's saying, if you don't want to get involved, you don't have to get involved. Somehow, he doesn't ever say God, but where do you think a Jewish man would believe deliverance and enlargement would come from? He's trusting that we're going to get through this. Somehow God's going to get us through this because God has promised our ancestors a long time ago that our seed would continue. God has promised a long time ago to bless all people through all nations through our people. God has made those promises in the future. There was covenants made in the past about that. So I believe this. If you don't want to get involved, fine, but God's going to. He doesn't say God, but who else would he be implying is going to deliver them? I don't think he's going like Haman with just hoping it's his lucky day. And then we have, let me back up a little bit. Let me say this. Many times God intends to use people to accomplish things, but they refuse to do it. In those situations, does God just give up on his plan? Nope, he just goes another route. That's the way God works. He intends to use people. If those people fail or decide they don't want to be used, God will use someone else. But the people that don't want to be used don't get the blessings or rewards from it either. And then the second part of the verse is the famous part. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? In fact, I think every preacher that's ever preached this passage probably has named this sermon for such a time as this. I avoided that cliche. This was a question intended to make Esther think. Could it be that God had put her into this position specifically for this moment in time? Could it be? Could it be that her whole life was leading to this very moment? Did God have a grand plan that included her? That question was intended to make her think some of those thoughts. The right question can really affect people like this did. Apparently that worked. It worked. Verse 14 worked, because look at verse 15 through 17. Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer. She didn't say no, did she? She didn't say, fine, God can do whatever he wants, I'm out. Go, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast feast. I like it when we throw an E in there. I prefer to feast over fast myself, but that's not biblical here. And fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. And I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. The rest of the chapter is very simply, Esther takes control. Now, she starts getting queenly with it. She says, all right, here's what's going to happen. If I'm going to put my life at risk, everybody's going to need to put put their hands in here and help me out, okay? Here's what I want you to do. And she explains it. I want every Jew in all of Shushan to fast. Now, I believe fasting is implied, praying is implied with fasting. Because fasting is not about what you want, it is about what you want more. It's saying, God, I'm going to give up food because what I desire more than food is whatever it may be. Salvation of a loved one, deliverance from situations, health problems being fixed. Fasting is not what I want, it's what I want more. So I believe it's implied that they were fasting and praying. And she says, and after 3 days and 3 nights of this, by the way, that's a long time to fast. She's making sure she's doing about as much as she can before she tries. Because she could have said, all right, well, here's what we're going to do. We're all going to skip dinner and talk to God about this. That's about as much fasting as I handle most of the time. I'm going to skip breakfast and pray about this, and then I'll have lunch at 11. And I'm going to talk about this to God. No, she says, all right, 3 days, 3 nights, no one. And even I and all maidens, so people that aren't even Jews, she's making anybody that works for her, anybody that's under her control, you're fasting too. And then after those 3 days, she says, then I'll go in. And if I die, I die. By the way, that makes me think of, this is kind of a side note, really random, but the Vikings quarterback, Kirk Cousins, he was asked about COVID last year. It might have been the beginning of the season. Anyways, he's still unvaccinated. And he was asked about it, and here was exactly what he said. If I die, I die. That's what he said. I was like, all right, Kirk Cousins, don't like you because you play for the Vikings, but good on you. Anyways, sorry, that's what I think of when I read that now. It's unfortunate. Kirk Cousins pops into my head instead of Esther. I should be picturing a beautiful, Hebrew woman, and instead I get Kirk Cousins' face. Back to the text. She says, if I die, if I perish, I perish. Real quick, I do want to remind you, I know we're kind of getting ahead on this, but fasting works. No, I preached through it in Joel. When I preach through Joel, we all kind of forget how that wasn't that long ago. And yet, many of us, even though the way that Joel, through God, had prescribed them to fix their problems was to fast, gather together, call a solemn assembly, get everyone in the house of God, fast, pray. And yet, we heard it, and I don't know if many of us fasted at all. So fasting works. I'm not going to preach on it long because we don't have time, but fasting works. If you need messages on that, go to our YouTube page. All of Joel there is basically all the same thing. The same exact point every time. Now let's do some preaching. We'll be done. I believe the main point to get across here for you is that God has providentially planned countermeasures for dark and hard times. Let me say that again. God has providentially planned countermeasures for dark and hard times. What I mean by this is, when things look their darkest, trust that God puts you here because this is your time. When things look their darkest, trust that God puts you here because this is your time. Do you realize that Esther was risking it all? No, not risking her crown, not risking her comfort, not risking her meals, not risking her home. She was risking her very life here very soon. Risking it all. Understanding that God providentially planned us to be exactly where we are when we're there. Let's break that down. Number one, things can get dark. Things can get dark. Now, in fairness, most of us will never face something as dark as what the Jews faced in our passage. I hope. I say that and I look at some of the younger generation here and wonder what they'll have to face later as the Lord has not returned yet. But there are other things that can get dark. Churches can wither. Your children can go astray. Your marriage can struggle. Your health problems can arise. Your government can overstep its intended boundaries, even though we have a constitution. Anyways. And in each of those situations, we should understand that because of our sin nature, we will always be facing dark times. We'll always be facing dark times of some kind. No, I get the sense that some Christians just expect this world to be all smooth and easy and fun. And that's just not the reality of it. Because we are not innately good people that sometimes do bad things. We are innately born sinners that occasionally, through the help of God, do good things. But because we are all born sinners, because we are all wicked from birth, bad things are going to happen. Our government's going to do dumb things. We live in a society that murder is okay. So no, people go to jail for murder. No, they don't. At least not of the unborn. Dark times are always going to be here. Number 2, it's no accident that you're in this position. What position? I don't know, whatever position you're in. Be it parent, boss, employee, grandparent, woman, man, part of this church, wherever you are, you're in this position, and it's not an accident. Even though dark times are inevitable, it's not a mistake that God puts you here to go through it. God is not a God of accidents. He's not a God of chance. He's a God of providence. And God knew that our church would be what our church would be going through. He knew what your children would be going through. He knew what your health would look like. He knew what your government would be trying to do. And in each case, He purposely put you here because this is your time. Joseph knew his brothers meant evil, but understood that God meant it for good. You know why the story of Joseph, one of the things that makes that account so spectacular, is because Joseph was so forgiving. Because I couldn't be. It's different. It's so spectacular because he knew his brothers hated him. He knew his brothers wanted him dead. He knew his brothers tried to kill him. He knew his brothers sold him into slavery when they decided that killing him wouldn't be as profitable as selling him. And understanding all that, he still knew God has me in this position for such a time as this. And when it came time for a famine, he said, you may have meant evil, but God meant it for good. Because he understood that truth, that it's no accident that you are where you are. Lastly, this goes with number 2, but you can either fulfill your role and be blessed, or refuse and watch God work through someone else. I'll say that again. You can either fulfill your role and be blessed, or refuse and watch God work through someone else. While God purposely puts you in the position you're in the time you live in the family you have, in the church you have, all for a reason, He still gives us a free will. He still gives us a free will. And just as Esther could have refused to involve herself, you can too. No, don't mistake it. Esther had every bit of power to say, I don't want any part of this. Stop talking to me. The only reason Mordecai could get in touch with Esther is because Esther put an olive branch out there with her maids, with Hadik, whatever you want to say. She's the one that extended. If any point in time she didn't want any more conversation to happen, she could have stopped it. She could have said, I don't want any part of this. I think I'll be safe. But she got involved. God is intending you to be an important part of, let's start here, the church, this church. Oh no, you don't understand, Pastor. I'm this age, or I'm too young, or I'm too old, I'm not qualified, I'm not comfortable. Do you think God mistakenly put you in this church? You think it was like, oh, well, I got to drop them somewhere. Let me think. What church should I just drop them? Where'd they land? Oh, they landed in Peakview. It'll work. It sometimes feels like that with your pastor, I know, but to go with the message, that's not the case, I guess. God made you the age you are right now for a reason. I know that seems really weird, but He knew who to give the wisdom and experience to for this time. No, I lack wisdom and experience to a degree, more than I want to admit. But He knew this is the time because He's put people in this church who have the wisdom and experience to come alongside me and help me. It's it's a weird realization that I may actually have, as an older pastor, a lot more younger families, but that'll be when I have the wisdom to approach that and handle that. Whereas when I have older folks, maybe God understands that I'm not ready for the older, but He makes no mistakes with our age. He makes no. I know that seems so silly. You're like, really, our age? You want to talk about our age? No, yeah, because age somehow becomes an excuse for everything. I'm too young. I'm too old. Don't feel like it. Well, it doesn't really matter. God made you this age. You can take advantage of the wisdom he's given you if you're older, or you can take advantage of the youth and the energy that he's given you when you're younger. No matter what, God knew the age you'd be today. God put you around the people you're around because they need somebody to witness to them, and he wants to use you. You think it's by chance God gave you the job he gave you? Oh, you think God just said, well, they need to get a job somewhere, so we either have to believe that God is providentially, sovereignly over everything, or he's not really in control of anything. I'm going to lean towards that. He's in control of everything. He knew exactly who the people you would rub shoulders with. I would never have met Holly if I didn't have the job I had at 16. She'd have never got saved at 17 had I not had the job that I had at 16. We wouldn't be married today. There wouldn't be 2 kids here. With 3's practically here. Just needs to join the party already. So we can start counting that thing on roll. Because God knew. He put me around certain people. Because I was that person, I was able to reach somebody that I didn't know. And it's literally worked out amazingly for me. Not so well for her. She got suckered. But it's working out great for me. But we treat our job like, oh, this is just where I go to make money. Or, oh, these are the family members I have just because you can't choose your... No, God knew exactly who he was going to put you in a family with. There's times when I think, man, I was talking to Park Sutton. We were both heading back from New Mexico on Thanksgiving on I-25. And all of a sudden I see this guy pass me. I said, they look familiar. And I said, that's Park Sutton. So I catch up to him. I'm like... And then so we pulled over and we were talking. And his father-in-law, his dad's a pastor. Bill Sutton's still a pastor today. Still. He's still trucking. But then also Melissa's father is a pastor in Albuquerque. And I think to myself, man, how cool would that be? You know, to have a pastor dad and a pastor father-in-law. That's awesome. But God didn't give me that. So, like, oh, well, God didn't give me that, so I'm not doing it. No, God knew exactly who he'd have me marry and exactly what that family would be like. Why? Because apparently he wants me to do something about it. To reach them. Because God doesn't make accidents. He doesn't have accidents. In each case, God isn't going to give up his plan. He's going to use you. So if you believe that it's not an accident, you can take advantage of the position that God has put you in, or you can just let it slide and let God let somebody else reach him. You say, well, if God's just going to reach them without me, great. Yeah, I have no doubt that God's grace is still going to reach those people. They'll hear the gospel. They'll hear the presentation of salvation. They'll hear about God from someone else, but you're going to miss out on the blessings and rewards. That's just the reality. Somebody's going to get blessed for it. You can either take advantage of it or you can let it slide. Somebody else is going to get blessed for the service they do in this church. You can either jump in and be a part of it, or you can let somebody else be blessed. It really doesn't affect my life all that much either way. If I'm doing the cleaning every week, or if somebody else does, it doesn't make that much of a difference to me. But do you realize just by something as simple as signing up to clean, that's your blessing to gain? Just by something as simple as bringing sides for lunch, just by something as simple as handing out tracts, that's just your blessing to gain? No, I can do it. I can vacuum. Y'all have heard it. I like to clean. It doesn't bother me at all. But that's somebody else's blessing that I'll be taking if you're not willing to take it. If somebody else wants to witness to your family because you're not willing to, that's your blessing and reward lost.
That's right.
But that could also mean punishment for your disobedience as well. Now, our God's not some vindictive, mean, angry God that people like to paint him as. That's not him. But he is a just God. If you understand just, it means getting what you deserve. Some people, that's all they care about. Well, I just want to get what I deserve from God. Well, if you're not saved, that's a scary place to be. Because what you deserve is hell. That's what we all deserve. That's what I deserve. That's what I still deserve is hell. By Jesus Christ and his sacrifice, I don't. But God is a just God. And so, even if you're saved, if you say, look, I'm saved, I'm not worried about the rest. Well, when you get to heaven, you're ready for your justice. You're ready to face God and say, look, I know I had family members that were lost, but I just didn't feel comfortable witnessing witnessing to them. I know I had coworkers that don't know Jesus Christ as their personal Savior, but I didn't feel comfortable letting people know I was a Christian. I know I know you laid it on my heart to fulfill that ministry in my church, but I just really didn't feel like that was something I wanted to do. I know you wanted me to do this or this. I just didn't really feel like it. And God said, no, I still accomplished those things, but now you're in trouble. The rewards and the blessings, they're all gone. And here you are, standing before me, going, I don't know what happened. I'll say that CIT again and we're done. When things look their darkest, trust that God put you here because this is your time. This is your time for this church, for your family, for the community. This is your time. Let's pray.